Greetings. If you are a subscriber of my channel, you know who I am. If not, then let me explain who I am. I'm Suzanne Titkemeyer. I wrote a column called No Longer Quivering for Pathos for nearly 10 years. I took the column over from Vicki Garrison, and I need to talk about this a little bit. I've been triggered to be ranty today on a day when I'm not feeling real well. And I took a look at a video series, a creator that I follow, a newer creator that goes by the moniker Down the Rabbit Hole at Bedtime. I really enjoy her content. She's quite good at what she does. I didn't realize until recently that she was in Malaysia. So there's something to be said for those of us who are overseas with nothing else to do. Okay. And I'm not saying that about her. I'm saying about me, that I'm one of those people where I don't really have a set schedule. I do what I want when I want. I feel like I sound like Cartman saying, I do what I want when I want. Anyway, long story short, I just have to piggyback onto the back of her episode because I wasn't going to do a video at all today, feeling really crappy. So here goes nothing. Oh, in 2010, I took over the blog No Longer Quivering from Vicki Garrison, the originator of the blog. And it was moved within months to Pathos. Now, I don't know exactly what went down with Pathos and Vicki, if they thought they were getting Vicki, not me, but I'm sorry about that, Pathos. I had no control over that. So anyway, long story short, before I started talking to Vicki, I was a member of a message board called Free Ginger. That their big thing was to free Ginger Duggar from her fundamentalist leanings, or not leanings, her fundamentalist lifestyle. I ended up unjoining at one point because it became problematic, some of the things that people were saying and doing. And as somebody who was trying to recover from fundamentalist religion at that time, it was just too much to see people that had never been members of our high demand religious organizations sounding off about what we should do and calling various people names and throwing aspirations. It was just really a hard thing to sit through, so I just quietly unjoined. And I started working at NLQ. And at first it was confusing. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I'd only been out a year more than Vicki, so I wasn't even very far along in my recovery at that time. Looking back, I probably should have said, no, I'm not doing this. But I had a couple things happen. I got quite sick in 2006, 2007. Was diagnosed with mast cell. I had difficulties maintaining a job because my mast cell was so severe. So this Pathos thing gave me an opportunity to take over and make a few dollars at home and be able to contribute to the family finances. And let me tell you, when I didn't work, finances were very tight for us. So this was a godsend for me. And I liked Vicki. God knows I wasn't going to fight with her about anything. I was just going to keep doing the best I could do. She made suggestions. I followed through on them. Now, her reputation about the time I'd taken over had been trashed by the women of Free Ginger over her daughter Angel and her, their interactions, things that Vicki exposed that she probably shouldn't have. And they really turned against Vicki and said that Vicki was deliberately harming Angel. They believed some things that Angel said that weren't exactly the most true things on the planet. All I can say is when you have a mother and daughter who are both angry at each other, sometimes these things happen and you can't really build a big thing around it. But anyway, that caused pretty much everybody at Free Ginger to hate Vicki's guts and No Longer Quivering. At the same time, I was dealing with another writer at Pathos, whose name I'm not going to name, who disliked me avidly because she thought she was taking over NLQ, not I. And when I took over it, she was extremely jealous. She went way out of her way to try and throw mud at me personally. And I took it for a long time, and it got to the point where it boiled over to the point where my husband was making threats. And I just had to say, whoa, well, let's all take a step back. And I realized something. Somebody like me who was first gen quiverful could not help the second gen, the kids. That needed to be somebody in their own group. So I just stepped back and away from all of that as well. So one of the things that Free Ginger had against Vicki was the whole Raising Ruth debacle. If you don't know who Ruth was, she was a blogger with Blogspot. And I think it's raisingruth.blogspot.com. Her blog is still up. It was just one quiverful horror story after another with her. And she didn't actively beg for money, but there were some at Free Ginger that started raising money for her. Every time you turned around, she was begging for money. In a not begging for money sort of way. She never said, hey, I need money. Just like, it was more like, oh my gosh, my expenses are so tight because I have this at the hospital, I've got that. And then somebody would show up at Free Ginger and say, let's raise money for her. Well, I remember when Raising Ruth first showed up at No Longer Quivering, and Vicki asked me, said, do you think she's genuine? And I did a little bit of a search and said, maybe. That was the most I said, is maybe she was genuine. And we did share a few of her blog posts and linked to her for a while. But as the days went on, Vicki was almost completely standoff to No Longer Quivering. The only time I ever heard from Vicki is when she needed money. Vicki, anytime I would have a big month or I'd have a lot of hits, like the month that it was exposed that Judge Duggar did things to his sisters, I wouldn't have heard from Vicki for 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And all of a sudden she'd pop and say, give me some of that. And I did. I'd grumble a little bit inside, but I would split my pay with her on those months, which was kind of a drag because I could have used the money. I had 2 kids in college at the exact same time. And you want to talk expensive? That's expensive. So I did it anyway. I did it gratefully because Vicki gave me a shot when I was having to look at my life and completely redo everything, redo my entire everything. So I kept my mouth shut. I asked Vicki more than once about Raising Ruth, and she said she'd had a phone call with Raising Ruth, if I'm recalling correctly, and that Raising Ruth was exactly who she said she was. So I didn't remove any links to Raising Ruth, but I didn't use any more of her posts either. We just kind of put a moratorium on that. And I was glad I did because by the 2013, it came out that her story was entirely fictitious, or at least it seemed, based on the evidence I saw, that it was fictitious and that she might have been some lady named Christine. A lot of things happened. There were a lot of blogs that she wrote, and there were a lot of anti-blogs I saw too. And I actually said on one of them, I said, you know, I'm becoming more and more convinced that Ruth is a Poe. She's somebody that is not genuine. She's written all this and as if she were writing a novel in the first person. So I removed her. I removed everything of hers from No Longer Quivering because we really don't want to be associated with anything remotely like that. And I got a lot of crap about that from various people, both pro and con. But it was just one of those things. I had known in my heart for a long time that there was something that was not right there. But so many people are so damaged by the things that have happened to them through evangelicalism, through quiverful, through fundamentalist evangelicalism, through every other flavor and color you can think of in the rainbow that makes up patriarchy. I just didn't know what the problem was until 2013 when it seemed pretty certain that she was a lady named Christine and was lying her biscuits off. So I stopped it. Vicki Garrison was still saying to that point that she had spoken on the phone to Ruth and Ruth was genuine. So this was one of those things that Vicki and I were going to have to agree to disagree on. So there was that. That was our history with Vicki. That was our history with the whole Free Ginger organization, which was a whole level of cluster, you know what. on its own. And so then this continues on. Vicki started going around and speaking in various atheist communities, which I was all for that. I had no problem with the fact that Vicki was going around speaking, that when CNN came calling or whoever, she was the one they published. And I was the one behind the scenes providing background support, sometimes providing information to places like People Magazine or whatever. And I was fine with that. I had no desire to push myself in front of any camera. It's only now that I've been doing this a while, I've actually gotten more comfortable with it. I'm usually pretty shy and quiet. But I made the decision to start doing these videos after I stopped working for Pathos. And I started thinking about writing a bunch of books. I got a pile of them that I've worked on, including one on Quiverful, on my experiences, because my experiences are kind of unique in the fact that I was a little older when I joined. I had an education. I wasn't somebody thrown into it right out of high school. So there was that. And I've posted my story here and at No Longer Quivering a number of times now. If you want to see it, it is among the posts here on YouTube. I'll try to put a link in the description to it because it's a long and involved one for me. How I got in, how I got out, the whole salami. So as time went on, I heard less and less from Vicki Garrison, and she had less and less to do with NLQ. And I was okay with that because by that time, I knew what I was doing. I knew where I was going. I was considering this an enormous blessing to be able to do this for the house and make a little money to help with the schooling, to help with the costs of college. And college is more than the expenses of books and tuition. It can be a quite costly thing. We could not have been more penny pinching in those years. So while Vicki had less and less to do with NLQ, at one point she popped up and wanted me to run a fundraiser for her because she'd gotten in trouble with her credit cards. And they were threatening to take her house, her lone really big asset. So I did it. I did a GoFundMe with blood, sweat, and tears. I'm going to tell you, I somehow managed to raise $22,000 for Vicki and pass that along to her, where she immediately started complaining on the fact that she was going to have to pay taxes on this $22,000, that it wasn't a freebie gift. And I was kind of taken aback and said, oh my goodness, somebody pays off your credit cards and you're going to criticize? You're going to criticize how it was done. Then Vicki started asking for more and more fundraisers. I did a few kind of half-heartedly and didn't promote them very well. And to that point, I let other people say, hey, can you mention my fundraisers? Sure, you can mention your fundraiser. I can write you a nice little piece, insert it, and we go on. And hopefully you'll get more money that way. So after the ingratitude and the behavior over the $22,000 fundraiser, I was less than willing to fundraise for Vicki Garrison. For me, that was it. I was cut off from that. I was not going to do this anymore. Fast forward to about a year before I gave up NLQ. About a year. I stopped writing for No Longer Quivering back in November of 2020. So a little ways into the pandemic. But about a year before that, Vicki Garrison approached me to do fundraisers for her. And I pretty much refused to do them. And I saw she had 7 or 8 fundraisers. She was saying she was fleeing an abusive relationship. Well, I don't want anybody to stay in an abusive relationship. I'm not going to endlessly fundraise for somebody that keeps, how should I put this to be nice about it? People that kind of do their own drama. They create their problems. I just didn't want to I didn't want to do that. And at the same time, I was dealing with people like I have a friend on Facebook who I gave money to get to her grandfather's funeral. She didn't have money. I gave money a couple other times to her for various things. And then she started asking for money for a maid to clean her house and stuff. And I was kind of like, enough. So at that point in my life, I just cut off all fundraisers. I did no more fundraisers. I paid no money to anybody that was not a legitimate 501c type organization. For me, that was the end. So at that point, in 2019, Vicki wanted me to turn No Longer Quivering over to her. And I had to explain that when BeliefNet took over Pathos, I had gone from making a decent amount of money to making virtually nothing. About enough to pay for my crafting supplies and my books. So I had to say, no, this is not happening. And I had already heard from, at that point, a ton of people, including my friend Cindy Kunzman, who had donated money to Vicki for various things, and it was never used for the thing that it was fundraised for. At one time, we were trying to get off the ground a Take Heart Foundation. There was money raised for that did not go for it. Various things. There was money raised, but none given out to anybody that needed it. And Cindy occasionally has fundraisers for things, like she was trying to raise money for the girls of Hepaziah House. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I'm too tired to even look it up. So there was no money going out at all at that point. Okay, over a year ago, around, I guess it must have been, let me think about this a minute. My brain is kind of fried. I think it was around Christmas 2020. I started getting notices that Vicki was moving to Albania. Well, I wish her well, and I wish anybody well who's moving anywhere. I had not been long, three and a half years out of my transition from the DC burbs to here in Costa Rica. And I understood exactly how difficult of a change that is. How there's a million ways to get rolled as a gringo. There's a million mistakes you can make. God knows I made a ton of them. So did my husband. Everything here goes at a glacial pace. Nobody hurries about anything. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So it was what it was for us. And I'd been writing a book also about my move here. I had to put it aside because with COVID, so many things have changed. And every month, still there are changes. So I'm not going to pick that up and finish that until the changes are finished, because a lot of things that were in the book that I was talking about aren't a problem now, or they don't exist any longer. So Vicki, now she's moving to Albania. I started looking at the country information for Albania. That's one thing I love about being online, is you can go into the embassy's website. You could read their warnings. I do that for Costa Rica. I look to see when the highways are shut down by, what do you call them, by strikes and other things. And they'll warn you if there's violence in a region. They'll warn you if something has happened near the embassy that shut the roads. The American Embassy is great about that. And I just got to say, if you ever decide to move overseas, or even if you come for just a visit somewhere, the best thing you can do is register with the embassy. Register with them. Let them know how long you will be here. And they'll send you alerts if something happens. And that's worth a lot of money. So Vicki decided, I'm reading through the information on the State Department website, on the website for the embassy, all these different things. And the more I read, the more frightened I'm becoming for her. Because Albania has a pretty serious drug problem in the South half. Government officials, anybody employed by the government, is not allowed in certain areas of Albania, and it is listed as rather violent. There are people ripping off gringos left and right, and I use the gringo term lovingly to mean anybody from America or Europe. We had a discussion about that the other day on a Costa Rican board I'm part of, and we all pretty much decided that gringo is not necessarily a insult. Sometimes it just is a fact of life. And so that's what a lot of us call ourselves here, gringos. And we call the local people the name that they picked out, ticos or ticas. I call people when I'm in Nicaragua, nicas or nicos, depending upon what their sex is. And so I started to get very frightened for Vicki, extremely frightened, because everything I was seeing on the country pages that the U.S. was saying about Albania, nothing was positive. It was all pretty out there. Yeah, my hair's shifting around. I'll tell you how sick I am. I haven't done anything with it. So she was going to this country that had formerly been communist, that was now a rather impoverished place. I knew she was going to bump up against culture. If you change your culture, and to quote Lawrence Brown from um, Lost in the Pond, which is his YouTube channel, where he talks about the differences between Great Britain and the US. To quote him, he says, when you move overseas, it's like you start your life over again. You start another life. And there's a lot of truth to that. So Vicki didn't speak any kind of dialect that they speak in Albania. It looked, from everything I could obtain and from talking to her, that she had leapt into this without thinking. I just could not wrap my mind around the fact that she took a place that was so violent and so impoverished as a place to live. When she started posting all about being there and how much she was paying for an apartment, the apartment was gringo prices. I'm just going to tell you that right now. From looking at Coldwell Banker and some of the other American real estate agencies that actually operate there as well as here and as well as in the United States. So I started to really get worried for her at that point. She was constantly posting about how wonderful Albania was all the time. And I tried to talk to her. I tried to get her to listen to reason. I tried to tell her about how here the crucial moment is about 2 years, sometimes 3, but mostly around the 2-year mark, where people moving here have decided to go back, that they've just had enough of the culture here. It's too much of a culture shock. They can't change and do the culture. It's too much. So they go home with a lot less money and a lot sadder. Some of them go back having experienced violence here, even though there's very little of that. Even myself, I have been the victim of petty robbery one time, where a painter was painting my bedroom, rifled through my things, and took some jewelry. He took my wedding ring, which wasn't particularly valuable, but he took my wedding ring and he took some very inexpensive little pendants I had. And he left all the good jewelry. I don't think he knew what was what at that point. But anyway, we all experience that crap. When you get to the 2-year mark and you're here and you're like, do I really want to stay? Yeah, it's great. I'm a half a mile from the beach. But is it really worth? So you start thinking like that. And I had a point where I did that too. I was ready to go back home. At the 3-year mark, my husband decided he was ready to go home. I'd already flipped back over to Costa Rica, being pro Costa Rica. And I had to talk him out. I was kind of like, are you nuts? And so I worried about that for Vicki. I worried that she would get that extreme burnout where the newness wears off and you're like, okay, so this is my life now. Not understanding what people are saying. And I've taken Spanish in college. I'm not completely ignorant of Spanish. I can't make myself that well known. You know, the whole thing that a lot of people do. I went through it too. They went through it. It's just, it is what it is. Either you push through and you stay and you're happy that you did that. And I have to tell you, I'm extremely happy that we're here. I don't have any desire to go back to the States except to see my kids. That's it. And if I could get them to come down here once or twice a year on vacation, that's even better. But Vicki was having none of that. She told me I was wrong about everything. I was wrong about the violence. I was wrong about the drugs. I was wrong about the gringo shuffle, which occurs anywhere in the world where you don't speak the language and you're going there to live. And they're like, welcome, gringo. Hand me your wallet. I do see that happen here, and I have enough Spanish now that I fight with them because I'm like, no, you're not charging others that. You wouldn't charge me that if I was at Tico. So you develop those skills, and either you develop those skills or you don't. So after I had my say to Vicki, she blocked me on all social media. I tried to deactivate all of the No Longer Quivering Facebook groups because of it. I just decided I was just done. Done, done, done. And I had already shut NLQ at that point. And she kicked me out of each group. She kicked me out of all of them. So I'm locked out of the groups. Some of them that I founded that I was the one doing all of the work. And to this day, the last I heard, Vicki was still claiming that Raising Ruth was right on the money, that Raising Ruth is a real person who is exactly who she said she was. And I have to tell you, I don't believe a word of it. So I'm telling you this cautionary tale because if somebody is asking you to do fundraisers for them or to give them money, you need to investigate who they are and what they're doing. If it's a Vicki type, you need to look at what if they ask you for money for a foundation, you need to say, okay, I need to see your 501c certificate. I need to see your plans. I need to know what you're going to do with this money. You just don't hand it over. And I was stupid for handing over part of my paycheck to her many times because that just never ended. It was just a constant. The hand is out for some kind of money. And that's not how I roll. I don't ask people for super chats. I don't ask people for money. That's all in their business. If they want to super chat me so that I can buy some yarn, that's all well and good. But that's not my primary purpose for being on here. Those of you that know me know my life is pretty much an open book, for good or for bad. It just is. And yeah. So this video by Down the Rabbit Hole at Bedtime really reawoken and made me think again about what had gone down with Raising Ruth and what had gone down with Vicki Garrison. Now, I don't know if Vicki is still in Albania. I don't have a clue because I'm cut off from her in every way, shape, and form. Actually, I'm glad because now she can't ask me for money. And my friend that was asking me for money to pay for a maid for her and takeout, we're still friends, but she learned where my boundary was. So that's the other part of all of this. You have to really figure out where your boundaries are on all of this. I got up this morning feeling bad on the wrong side of the bed and took offense at something that someone said that was silly. But then I started thinking about it, and it's like, no, it's not silly because my boundary is here, and this person went over here. Here, and they went over there. So what's happened is I'm constantly editing people in and out of my life because as someone still in recovery from what I went through, and there are still times that I screw up and do things like I did back then. There aren't any evil people, bad people, good people. There are safe and unsafe people for me is how I read it. And Vicki is rather unsafe. My friend who kept hitting me up for maid service money is pretty safe as long as you're not giving her money and enabling her. Free Ginger. And Free Ginger said a bunch of shit about me for this very video, this very thing I'm talking about with Vicki going to Albania, comparing, saying that I was hypocritical for moving to Costa Rica and then telling her she could move to Albania. There is a world of difference between what I did and what she's doing. I came here with everything planned. I'd visited here like 4 or 5 times. I knew what I was getting into. I knew the culture. I had traveled around the country enough to know exactly where I wanted to live. I had checked the boxes and answered all the variables. And I came here with my eyes wide open. I didn't have any kind of romantic views about the people, the culture, or anything else. I knew what it was. She's never been there. This was her first trip there. And it was kind of funny because she was telling me that one of the reasons that she wanted to go there is you could live there a full year without getting another visa stamp. Not quite what I was reading on the website. They had some confusing rules about becoming a resident, a temporary resident versus a permanent residency. There were also these weird rules about just how long your visa was good for. And the most I could find was it did say in one place, it said 1 year. But a lot of other government things said, no, no, no. If you stay the 1 year, you have to get out and stay out. Or you can do the every 6 month thing and keep your visa valid all the time. I don't know. I just hate to see people that I know charging in blindly into situations that they have not thoroughly researched. It just breaks my heart. And here, we're in the middle of a boom here. Everybody tells me there's a boom in the U.S. too. Rents have doubled. Home prices have skyrocketed, the whole 9 yards. So we're actually thinking about doing home building and home flipping here. And this is something I would have never considered in the past. But it's another open doorway that we can make a little money, a little something, something on our investments. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. And I just wanted to extrapolate and explain a little bit more from Down a Rabbit Hole at Bedtime's video. Her video is good, as usual. She always does a good job of it. And she's right. Raising Ruth, the lady behind Raising Ruth, exploited Duggar fans, and she exploited the free ginger rights, and she exploited a whole field of people. We don't really know for sure how much money she took. She took something like 12,000, I think it was, from people on free ginger, I believe it was. You know, sometimes I'm disgusted living in this world, not Costa Rica, in this world where people will exploit each other, people will ask for money for stupid things, people will fundraise, and it's not even remotely true what they're fundraising for. I've seen so much of that through the years. So be cautious who you give to and have a good evening. I hope to be back tomorrow, but if I feel like this, it'll be another day laying in the bed. See you guys later.